Good afternoon, we are now live.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this new session from the FTTH Council Europe's webinar series. My name is Michele Nardi. I'm Marketing and Communications Manager here at the association, and today I have the pleasure of moderating this webinar hosted by our member 3GIS, a provider of web-based GIS software for fiber network management. 3GIS will be joined by Esri UK today for a high-level discussion over the advantages of using GIS-based solutions to make data more comprehensible, streamline operations, and automate processes. So, very looking forward to this session. I can see the registrants are progressively joining the webinar. So maybe I will just spend a few words to introduce you to the FTTH Council Europe before handing over to our speakers. So the FTTH Council Europe is a European industry association whose mission is to advance ubiquitous fiber-based connectivity to the whole of Europe. We are joined as an association in this mission by over 160 member companies who represent the vendor, operator, and investor communities across the European Union. As part of our main activities, we advise policymakers and regulators in implementing effective policies in favor of FTTH rollouts and adoption. And we also produce a series of market reports and studies on a variety of industry topics, thanks to the help of our committees and working groups. And in a way, we serve as a knowledge base for professionals and decision makers in the field. We see ourselves ultimately as a networking platform to foster business development and innovation at every step of the fiber supply chain. And we obviously are the organizers of the annual FTTH conference. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the event, whose next edition will be held in Amsterdam in March 2025. Now, the FTTH webinar series is also a crucial part of our mission in a way, and consists essentially on a series of sponsored fiber industry webinars, which bring on stage the expertise and the know-how of members of the FTTH Council Europe. Via this series of online meetings, we regroup decision makers, field operators, professionals in general, and provide them with new tools and knowledge to further develop their business and their professions. Now, just going through some housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and will be accessible digitally after the session through our YouTube channel and website. Participants to this session will receive an email tomorrow with direct link to the presentation we will go through today and to the on-demand version of the webinar. The speakers will be very happy to address any of your questions during the dedicated Q&A we have at the very end of the webinar. So please don't be shy. Feel free to raise questions as we progress in the presentation. There is a question box on the top right of your GoToWebinar platform. So please feel free to use it at any point of the presentation. Moving ahead, I just wanted to introduce you to the main topic of this session, as we touched upon earlier. Today we will talk about utilizing GIS data within the telecom industry, essentially. You will learn how GIS-based solutions can help making data more accessible, comprehensible, streamlining field operation, and increasing data visibility across the entire organization. There will be some live demo also explaining how GIS can contribute in making resource management more effective and in automating processes. So now, this being said, I'm quite happy to introduce you to today's speaker lineup. So from left to right, as shown on the slide, we have Ethan Pennington, Telecom's account manager at Esri UK, Emma Perry, Senior Customer Success Consultant at Esri UK, and Ed Bagnall, Product Manager at 3GIS. So at this point, I will leave the floor to Ethan for the first part of the presentation. And of course, I wish all of you a great session. Again, thanks to 3GIS, the sponsor of the webinar. And we will be in touch later for some polls and the Q&A session. So enjoy your webinar, and Ethan, the floor is yours.
Hi all. Yeah, so as Mikhail mentioned, thank you for joining today. So we'll be talking through how you can unlock your GIS data to sort of combat the telecom skills challenge. So just a quick outline of what we want to cover in today's session. So we want to try and explore a few actions that a telecom provider can implement into their business to start to increase their success. So this includes making data more comprehensible. So how to make it easier for your staff to understand what's going on. We'll then touch on reducing field visits during your build period so that you can start to cut down on costs and start to work more efficiently. And then once we've captured that data in the field, how can we increase its visibility so that we can give all departments the same information at the same time and start to promote an environment of sort of using self-serve applications. And then finally, we'll touch a little bit on automating those processes that are a bit more repeatable once you've got an efficient workflow, which will ultimately allow you to be able to do more with less. So those are the points that we're going to cover today. I suppose, why have we chosen this topic and why is there such a focus on your data and what you do with that data? So things are changing in the market, I think, potentially quicker than we first expected in the telecoms industry. So the current economic climate, as well as the increased interest rates, has caused a push for a lot of alternative networks, especially in the UK, to start focusing on getting customers instead of working on homes passed. So that's meant for a lot of network providers, their build has slowed down, and because of that, the headcount has had to be reduced. So 76% over 6 years. That's a source from the TM forum. So that's meant that, and it's not just the alternative networks as well. So BT are also experiencing the squeeze. So they've sort of announced recently that they're going to be cutting costs by 3 billion over the next 5 years up until 2029. So that's one issue that we're currently facing. So on top of that, we've got a lot of knowledge that's tied up in the industry and running those IT systems in employees that are nearing retirement age. So it's really important that we can try and learn as much from them as possible now if we want to keep the network running smoothly when they eventually retire. So because of this, a lot of operators are looking at uh, promoting from within. So giving people the opportunity to take on new challenges and responsibilities at potentially a time where they'd probably be a bit more experienced before they made that next step. So that comes with its own hurdles, I suppose. So it's really important for you to have a strong training program internally, and then also any tools that you're using. It's really important that they have a wide documentation because you're not always going to have all of the experience that you're used to having on using those tools. And that's where, if you're using a tool that's got a really good community support, so it's widely adopted by the industry, it's a lot easier to get along with and you can help upskill people more quickly. And then I guess finally, there's a shortage for some specific skills that are highly needed in the industry. So cybersecurity, data and analytics, software engineering, AI gets mentioned a lot. It feels like everywhere we look at the moment, the word AI gets mentioned. And to be honest, I still think we're trying to work out exactly what that means for a network provider and where it's going to fit into our workflows. So ultimately, based on those challenges, we're going to need to start doing more with less if we want to operate more efficiently, which can sound like a daunting challenge. How can we have a higher output with less staff? How do we navigate the developments of generative AI, both the positives and the negatives? And how are we going to effectively complete knowledge transfers so that everyone is using one version of the truth and is on the same page? So that's a bit of an insight on where we believe the industry is currently at and I guess heading. And I do think it's on the rise as well. It had a bit of a dip over the last few years, but I do think we're bouncing back. But I just wanted to briefly, before we dive into sort of the demos, I just wanted to touch on a bit of ourselves as a business. So when it comes to the telecoms industry, we currently work with all tier one fiber companies in the UK and the US, as well as hundreds more across the world. And really, we see sort of GIS and geospatial analytics as a business solution. So it's a tool set that can be used by anyone, and that's whether they're an experienced GIS professional, they've used software for 25 years, or they're just someone that needs to use a map to get their job done, and they don't really think about the sort of the back end analytical part of it. So something that we want to do is start to break down any data silos that a department may have. So for example, if a network operations team is collecting information on the network, it's really important that you can share that information quickly and give it to the right people at the right time so that they can make use of it as well, rather than just keeping it locked away. And I guess why are we talking about this? So we've worked in the industry a very long time, and we've built up a wide array of industry knowledge, as well as building the software tools to make planning, building, and maintaining a fiber network really simple. So we currently help thousands of end users on a day-to-day basis achieving their tasks, and I think now we're at over 80 million miles planned, designed, and managed within the 3GIS system. So, and again, the benefit of that is our tools are built on a sort of unifying foundation of software. So it's really easy to take all the hard work that your network teams are doing and then share that across to the rest of the business. So I hope that's given you sort of a brief outline of today's session, why we're here, what we think of the industry. And I believe I'll now hand over to Mikkel, who's going to put a poll up that should appear on your screen in a couple of seconds.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ethan. So indeed, now that the set is seen, I would like our attendees to let us have their view on what, from your perspective, is the biggest challenge in managing network operations in your organization. So I will just now launch the first poll of the session. And you should now be able to see the 5 alternative options in front of you. So those we would like to seek your opinion on. You can simply interact with the poll by clicking the option which most represent your current situation, and I can see that you are interacting with the poll. So I will just give you some more seconds so we make sure we collect as many inputs as possible before handing over to Ed to comment on the results of the poll. It's quite an interesting question to continue our conversation, and I can see that now the results are becoming quite stable. So I will just end the poll and share back the results. And looks like that managing and updating network data got the most of the answers. So I don't know, Ed, is this something you were expecting? Could you comment maybe on the outcome of this first poll?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think it's interesting. I might have expected balancing workloads and limited staff to be a little higher, which is interesting speaking to a lot of telcos as we do. But I think for a long time, managing and updating network data has always been a big and challenging and daunting task. I think more emphasis is coming onto that now as network build out slows a little and telcos are being forced to generate revenue. I think that it's a big challenge to make sure that systems are up to date with what's actually in the ground. So it's good to see that reflected within the wider community. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks very much. So let me now close the poll and maybe I'll give you back the floor to continue with your presentation, Ed. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And we're going to carry on, and we're going to start on our first topic now. So thank you for the warm introductions. And again, just from myself, thank you for your time today. I'm going to speak briefly about making data comprehensible. I think we've been working in the industry for about 20 years now. And something that we see time and time again when we go into telecoms is that we go in and we see that people always ask engineers who have worked in that business for a long time certain questions. And as we see the challenges that Ethan quite rightly laid out from the TM forum, we're going to be pressured by that as an industry to change the way we work. No longer are we going to be able to go to Bob, who is an engineer who's worked at Telco X for 30 years and just understands the state of the network and understands that cables are being fed from a certain exchange because he started at the company when they first put that in. That's not a system that's going to work and allow growth. So if we just kind of move on, I wanted to touch on a few things that are really important and answer a few typical questions that you would as a business, and why you need to have a different approach to just asking people, and why you might need a system that helps with that. I mean, the first one that we see day to day is people asking engineering teams for updates, information on circuits and signals in our networks. We understand that there is a customer. We understand what service that customer has. They're a fiber to the home customer on 1 gigabit, let's just say. We don't necessarily understand always in different departments where what are the physical elements that make up that circuit? Where is that customer? How are they being serviced? And very often we're asking experienced people for their help. They're looking at schematics on a wall, a big printout, and they're trying to figure these things out. And what we found is that adding the ability to store and capture network data and topology, and allowing people through things like this, like a simple signal trace in our tool, is really, really valuable and powerful. Here we can see that this particular customer is in this location, and we're scanning through now all of the physical elements that makes up that circuit. Not just the cables, not just the equipment, but when cables are within infrastructure and civil infrastructure, which of those are there? If we lease out network, which network are we leasing out from open access, whether it's Orange in France or PIA in the UK or other places? We need to understand that information without necessarily needing to go to somebody who's always known the answer to that. Similar types of scenarios here from fault management. The NOC team are often asking the engineering for, hey, we've got a couple of customers here that are complaining or have poor service. Do we have any common elements in the network that both circuits run through or not? Don't go off and figure these things out and have to work and bother certain engineers. Make sure that you have a tool and a capability that allows people to self-serve that information, whether they've been at the company for 40 years or whether they started 2 weeks ago. Make that really simple. Other tasks that we see very commonly, especially as we get more into leasing out our networks, this is becoming more and more important for the industry, right? As we try to generate more revenue, and we can't turn up every single customer and home that we've passed, right? So we're letting other ISPs come into the market. Well, I might have originally planned for us turning all the customers up, but now it's a little bit more complicated, and we need to answer a slightly different question. I need to understand where I've got capacity and availability on my network. And what I don't want to have to do is pour back through various files, CAD drawings, schematics on a wall, asking the actual build people who are involved around whether certain fibers are available or not. We need to be able to give people the tooling to enable this themselves. Where do I have bottlenecks? Where do I have availability? And if I want to be more specific and more prescriptive, use pointed solutions and tools like the one we're being demonstrated right now, which shows you, okay, what I'm actually looking to try and solve is I'm trying to get from A to B. I've just started at this company. The previous telco I was at did it a certain way. This one does it a different way. All I really actually need to know is A to B. How might I actually get between those two locations based on capacity, based on connectivity, based on the infrastructure? And allow a prescriptive productivity tool like this to give you that answer. Can you? Yeah. And this is what that might look like. So if you're looking to lease out a network or connect to a new neighborhood, let's make sure that we do things in a standardized way, again, regardless of how long that you've potentially been at a company. And then finally, and it's really interesting that we saw in the poll, sort of managing and maintaining the data as being a burden. We definitely see this as well. And very often what's overlooked is the quality of data within a system. So, a classic example that we see is not just storing information at, say, a fiber cable level, but being able to drill down into the fiber and document against those individual features for whether a particular fiber has been leased out, who to, is there a contract on it, but also things like, is that fiber broken? Was it damaged? we asked a certain third party to splice two big cables together. Sometimes things get broken, weather, other elements over time introduce damage as well. So if we don't understand at the root level that network documentation, we can't answer the questions in the best way that we want to. And we definitely won't be able to in the future if we don't have a tool like this documenting the systems when we start to have people moving from company to company, taking knowledge with them. You need to make sure you have that knowledge captured in a physical network inventory that you can expose in a really easy and pointed way. I think we're then going to move on to the next section, which is reducing field visits. And for this, I'm going to hand over to Emma, who's going to take you through that.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, so I'm going to build on some of that sort of data story a little bit in this section, because by having really good data, we can start to improve workflows in other areas of the business, such as reducing field visits in the design phase. And we know that field visits are resource intensive, they require significant manpower and time. And we can typically get the accuracy of the design up to sort of 75% remotely, then a walkover can increase that to 90% as tweaks are made based on that on-ground knowledge. But our goal is to push that initial accuracy even higher, perhaps even up to 95%, to reduce the number of field workers needed. So to help achieve this, I want to show you a workflow where we can start to integrate various data sets to assess the suitability of locations for planning cabinet sites. And we'll use a combination of geospatial data and analytical tools to identify those optimal locations, to see that sort of how by leveraging GIS we can start to plan the most suitable locations. And this means that our cabinets will be positioned in locations that not only minimize immediate build-out costs, but also facilitate long-term maintenance. So ultimately, this approach sort of aims to enhance that accuracy of initial designs so that fewer field visits are necessary. So I'm going to start off by looking at some of those data sets that are available. And I'm going to do this in this desktop application where data visualization and analysis is undertaken by power users. In the map here, you can see our sort of study area around Doncaster, and I've got a list of data sets to the left here. So starting at the bottom, I've got a master map base map on, so you can see as I zoom in that you get that sort of varying level of detail around building footprints, property boundaries, road details, and areas of green space. Another base map that might be useful for this sort of analysis is world imagery. But for now, we'll just take a look at some of these other data sets. So the first one I'm going to turn on is some demographic data, and there are hundreds of metrics that you might want to choose from, but in this example, I've chosen total purchasing power and total overall spend on electronics IT. I've symbolized it by variant colors to pull those two metrics together. So you can see the darker areas are higher totals for both metrics. So that might be where you want to sort of start to target for service delivery. I also have in here some connected nations data, so freely available data. I've joined that to the same areas as the demographic data. So you can start to see where that might overlap with sort of the lower current gigabit availability and the demographic data. I'm now just going to focus in on the Doncaster Central area for the rest of the data sets. So firstly, this is a risk of flooding data. This is from the Environment Agency, and this is showing areas at high risk of flooding, and those might be areas that you want to avoid. And this particular example is showing low, medium, and high risk, but actually there's lots of other detailed flood risk data sets you could include. I've got conservation areas from historic England. These are again showing areas that you might want to avoid. And this is just an example of one of the many environmental data sets you might want to include. We have scheduled monuments, sites of special scientific interest, local nature reserves, that sort of thing. I'm also turning on public rights of way from Doncaster Council, so those might impact where you choose on a social value level. This one's quite interesting. This is pavement width. It's a relatively new data set, and it's classifying paths and roadsides where the data indicates that it's man-made. So you can see here we've got these different categories of width, less than 2 meters, 2 to 3 meters, over 3 meters. So that's going to be really helpful for suggesting locations for our cabinets, as they should be on areas over 3 meters. This is the World Traffic Service. This is a live data feed showing current traffic conditions, but I can also use my time slider to go back in time to see which areas get busy. I've also got Blue Sky National Tree Map data in here. So this is showing, well, National Tree Map is a database with the location, height, and canopy extents for every single tree over 3 meters in height. So again, a great layer for using as an input to planning in terms of location. You probably don't want to put a cabinet right next to a large tree. The next one on my list, this is title info. This is a layer created by us which provides access to corporate and commercial land titles published by the Land Registry, so they have full ownership detail, and that's been joined with other things like the UPRN of flood risk, so a really rich data set for knowing who owns which parcels of land in our study area. I'm also going to turn on address space. I've symbolized this using the graduated symbols, so that's based on a multi-occupancy field within the data. So the larger circles are where there are more addresses on one point, so that's indicating blocks of flats. And a couple of last sort of data sets here, I can add retail points of interest. So this one, for example, is showing the supermarkets in the area. And then lastly, we can add in existing BT infrastructure. So that might be useful to see where some of those existing assets are that you might want to connect into. So you can see now that I've turned all of these on, sort of by symbolizing them individually, they look great on their own, but actually it is quite hard to see what's going on, and I'm not about to start making any decisions based on this view. So within this tool or within this platform, I can start to use a tool called Suitability Modeler. And that's going to bring all of these layers that we've just looked at together to more effectively identify the most suitable locations to build cabinets. The first thing I'm going to do is subset my study area. And what I've done here is created polygons using the address space. So in each of these polygons is about 100 or so addresses to break my larger area into more appropriate blocks. Because we need to put a cabinet inside each of those polygons, I can run a tool to generate a point sitting at the center of each one. And while the center is theoretically an ideal place to choose, actually sometimes that center doesn't really sit in a great position. We've got one in a pond here, we've got one in a field over here. So what we're going to do is create a buffer to allow us to assess what's closer, look for the closest pavement, for example. And you could absolutely run a buffer like that on any other layer that you might have, maybe some of that PIA data if you wanted to make sure you were close to an existing manhole, for example. So I've done a little bit of sort of pre-analysis. I'm now going to go ahead and open the Suitability Modeler tool. And what this tool is going to do is take rasterized versions of the data sets that we want to include, reclassify them to a common scale. So in this case, we're using 1 to 10, where 1 will be not suitable and 10 will be highly suitable. And I want to merge them together with perhaps different weightings to start to provide that overall sort of picture of suitability. So I can go into the tool and start to add some of these data sets. Now I've already converted them to rasters for now, and I'm not going to add all of them. I'm just going to use a small selection so that we can start to see what's happening. So it's adding them into the tool, and the first thing we need to do is reclassify. So I'll start with the buffers, and when I choose to reclassify them, we can see that it's added the scale in for me and colored that scale as well using red to green. So actually for this example, I want to change this around because the closer to the center, the better. So I'll change that, that lower buffer there to 10, and the further away we get from the center is worse. So I'll change that to 1 to change the suitability of the layer. And when I go in and add another layer, you'll see when I do this, it's overlaying that data in the model so that when the high values overlap, you get that much higher red value, and the same the other end with the green. So we could do the same thing with the pavement widths. We can go and reclassify them, but this is actually already pretty good. I'm kind of happy with the levels it's given me there. Over 3 meters is the best, 2 to 3 meters is okay. But we can bring those sort of levels up or down as required. And you can see as I change them that the colors are changing on the fly. Now, I'm not going to do any more of these right now for the sake of time, but we can see in this example that they were all equally weighted. And you could change those weightings if different factors were more important. So what I'll do is I'll come out of this tool, turn everything off, and we'll have a look at some examples of results that I generated earlier. So the first one is that equally weighted one. And just a reminder, really, this is not all of the layers. We just chose 5. We chose the buffers, the pavement widths, the conservation areas, title info, and risk of flooding. You could use any other layers and as many layers as you want. So as I said, this one is the equally weighted one. You can see some of the key features coming through. We can see where that really high risk of flooding was pulling through. We can see our buffers quite well as well. But actually, pavement width is one of the more important factors to me. So I can rerun it, but with the pavement having a higher weighting. So now we can see where there's no pavement, that's pulling through a really low suitability. And we've got these kind of pockets of green where that 3 meter pavement is overlapping with the smaller buffer, is overlapping with local authority owned areas, are the things that we've said are good things in this model. So actually what I could do finally is I just want to bring those centroid buffers through a little bit more. I want to give them a higher weighting. So when we turn that one on, we can see that it's changed again. It's looking different again. So you can start to see how you can bring some of that data together and run it on the fly really easily to get the answers that you need. And the final part of this analysis is that I want to extract those higher values, those 8s, 9s, and 10s, convert them to a layer that I can share with my design team. So I've pulled that out really for the rough example that I've used, but you would of course have your own business rules and processes to drive that analysis to make it more accurate. We've got some sectors here with no results at all, and we've got some areas that overlap buildings, things like that. So you could perhaps incorporate some building footprint data to block that out, for example. And what you can also see in this example is I can do other things, like I can format the pop-up to pull in relevant information. We use these data sets to determine the highly suitable areas, but what we can actually do now is ask GIS to go back and look at those areas and pull back the actual value that's contributed to that highly suitable result, because we can see that this is a highly suitable area, but why? Because the pavement is over 3 meters wide, it's not got many trees, gigabit availability is medium. So we can use that to start to verify some of our assessment maps. But this vector layer is now ready to share in my online environment so that my colleagues can grab it for some further work. So I'm now going to pass back over to Ed to sort of expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. And I think that the next step with just to round out this journey is I think there's some really great data that can be driven, right, based on analysis. And we see working with customers, people in different countries do this different ways. But the value of this is that we can share that throughout the organization and leverage it. So back in 3GIS here, we're looking at the same data that Emma was just driving through. You saw a very comprehensive set of data sets and analytical tools. And I can start to leverage this in my network planning, my network design, both high level and low level, to really better inform the network. And as Emma said, try to strive towards as good a buildable network as possible. So we've got these same polygons in here of highly suitable areas for cabinets. We can start to pull through other data sets which will better refine our design. Aerial imagery, really powerful, especially when it comes to aerial networks. We've got OpenStreetMap databases, which provide that crowdsourced information of where businesses are. This cafe is at this location, especially, and also really accurate high-level topographic maps in the UK. There is the Ordnance Survey as an example of that, which gives me that street topology and topography that I'm interested in. I can see those curves again. I can see where schools are. I can see grass. I can see different types, and I can start to inspect based on what we receive from the GIS team start to inspect those areas and start to, okay, is this a good location to place a cabinet or not? And a tool that we've introduced a number of years ago and has been, really well used throughout our customers is increasingly adding Google Street View into the application. We've got numerous stories from customers who are taking initial project designs and changing them from within the office based on a virtual field walk or a field survey before going out. Here, for example, we've got some really great analytics saying these are some interesting locations to place a cabinet. But if we go there, we start to see, actually, this is outside of a school. Is that or is that not going to challenge our permitting process for getting access to dig this street or not? Another location that we're looking at here, well, that's fencing. We like to put our cabinets against structures or walls where possible. Another location seemed great, but Google Street Maps coming back and showing here that it's a private parking lot for a cul-de-sac of houses at this location. And there's no way that we're going to be able to get permitting to go and dig up that street, right? An additional location here, again, has got high fencing and has got lots of shrubbery and vegetation. So really maybe considering it's central to this area will work really well for servicing the 200 or 300 homes that we have in this area. I think that we've got a good location chosen for where we're going to place our cabinet with our splitters in to service this area. And really, this is exactly as Emma said right at the start about driving that better analytics up front so you can reduce costs at the expensive end, which is field walkouts, build, survey with third-party contractors. The better we do this part ourselves, the greater the costs we'll save down there. And that's going to only get rid of some of those pressures we have as an industry, as Ethan mentioned at the start. So I think we're going to go on to the next section. Before that, we're going to go back to Mikael for a poll.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much, Ed. It's indeed time for a second poll here, where we would like our audience to shine and let us know their view on their experience in leveraging GIS data in your telecom operations. So once again, let me just pop up on screen the options you can select between. You should now be able to see the 5 different options at your disposal. So my invitation to really interact with the poll. It's always pretty interesting to see our attendees' experience. I guess there's much we can grab from for knowledge sharing here. Maybe just a few more seconds for the poll to stabilize. And I think now we do have a clear winner. So I'm just gonna end the poll and share the results. So apparently, our attendees use GIS data primarily for network planning and design. Ed, is it something you were expecting? Would you like to comment a bit more on this?
Yeah, of course. It's as we expected and why we kind of spoke to it in the previous session, right? I think that it's something we're seeing more and more and more. I think it's very interesting to see monitoring as well. We also see that something that we didn't deliberately put on here as well, but we see in the industry is people using GIS data to better plan where to go out to next based on where they have capacity and where they also want to sell more. So lots of really good ways that we see people using GIS data here. Not too much of a surprise, I suppose, that network planning and design is right at the forefront.
Excellent, thanks Ed for your comments. So maybe now let me close the poll so we transition back to the presentation, but please allow me to remind our audience the question box is available top right of your platform. So whatever questions you may have about the content of the presentation, the live demo we saw, or any idea you have, please don't be shy and feel free to raise your questions. We have time to address these in a few minutes.
Perfect. And for the third section, we're going to again go to Emma. So I'll let her run everybody in the audience through that. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, so I guess for this, we've got the great data, we've reduced the amount of feet on the ground, we've improved build-out costs, but how do we then make that information accessible and transparent? Because when team members have the access to the information they need, they can start to work more efficiently and effectively. And if they don't have to keep making requests, this frees up people like the analysts to concentrate on their core responsibilities. Instead of spending time searching for data or churning out simple maps to many different organizations or even waiting for relevant information from other departments, they can focus on what they do best, perhaps more of that work that we saw around the site selection. So I'm going to show an example now of a collection of tools within GIS which allow us to really start to create that centralized platform where data is much more easily accessible to everyone, allowing for that self-service of information without relying on others. And that might be a field technician wanting to access coverage or asset maps. They can simply log on and retrieve that information themselves. And depending on how you share it, actually, that could ensure that they're looking at data in real time so that decisions are made on the most current data available. Or maybe it's a member of the sales team needing to prepare for a client meeting. They probably want detailed information, maybe on service availability, market penetration, and competitive analysis. So again, this information can be made available so that they can instantly access it to allow them to have a more effective conversation. So let's take a look. This is our sort of demonstration centralized platform for sharing data and resources for this very fictional telecoms company. This is an out-of-the-box tool that many of our customers are using to provide user experiences across the organization to allow people to do their jobs. You can see it's got a logo, a color scheme, but that's all, of course, fully customizable. We have a home page and two other pages. And I just want to jump into the mobile page here to show that you can make some parts of this accessible to only certain groups. So in this instance, right now, I'm not part of the mobile group. It's not relevant to me, so I can't see anything here. So just demonstrating really that there can be lots of different levels of access within the application. If we come back to the home page, this is a scrollable page, much like any other web page, so it's really intuitive to use. And the first thing we have is an embedded web scene, which is displaying some data in 3D. We have some 3D buildings and trees, but also a really simple representation of some of those cabinet locations that we're planning. This is embedded directly in here. Many other types of applications can be directly embedded as well. So if we keep scrolling, we can see some statistics here, and this could just be static text, or it could be live connections to other data sets in your organization, so they could be updated in real time. Here we have some links out to other applications, so we're maintaining that single place to access important information. Another feature of this platform is that it can be used as an open data site, so that means that you can make your content from your online organization or content from third parties available directly in here without users needing to go to the back end and dig it out. So you might want to include data that will help third parties to understand where they could lease land, or you could include public-facing maps of coverage. But again, it's a live connection to those data sets, so they would remain up to date, and you're in control of what layers you're sharing. You're also in control of how much metadata you provide and whether that data can be downloaded or not. We've kind of grouped it as categories here, but you could add a search bar for people to search the data. At the bottom of the page, we have another subset of apps or links out to other websites. So that allows you to create that single source of truth in terms of resources, not just data. I want to come back up to the applications because this is we've got a lot of great dashboards here, which is a great example of really helping people to self-serve information. So as I said, a variety of dashboards depending on our job role. So if we start with the construction dashboard, we can see information about the NAP areas, who created them, the status of each area, the overall number of connections, all sorts of different bits of information in here. And we can even see the work package attachments as well. And finally, I mentioned a salesperson earlier, so let's cater to them as well. In this example, we see another formatted dashboard with different charts, different visualizations and metrics, but now relevant to the sales team. So they're viewing just the data that they need. They're not being complicated and confused by other data sets. So that's all from me on this one. I'll hand back to Ed now for the final section.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I'm really passionate about that last section. I think it's really valuable. Gets rid of a lot of internal churn, right, in terms of people constantly bombarding your highly skilled, highly paid engineers. So the final thing that we're going to talk about is automating some processes. A little conscious of the time, so I'll press on. So the main thing here is about being able to do more with less, as Ethan said at the start, but also can we reduce and remove some of that duplicated work? And let's see a couple of examples of where we've helped telcos do this and how GIS can help. So let's start off with the removing of duplication of work and simplifying things. I want to tell a little bit of a story, if that's okay. So whilst this demonstration of an application that we built for a customer of ours is going, let me tell you why. So a company in the Middle East that we're working with that does fiber to the home came to us with a challenge and a problem. The challenge and the problem was that they had a team of 30 engineers in the office. That team was constantly drawing in drop cables, equipments into their network documentation system so that they could define from A to Z the full service. Only then could they turn it up and start to generate revenue. A team of 30 non-stop clicking away in a desktop application was capping them at a ceiling of about 300 connections per day. So they're all doing roughly sort of 10 each if you want to do the maths. And they came to us and they said, we need to do 2,000 connections a day to hit our revenue goals. We need your help. So we sat down with them, we talked to them, and something we found was that they're actually not only were they capped and that was an issue, but they were paying for the service twice. They had their own team documenting this, but actually what they were doing was they were paying a third-party contractor to go out and turn up those customers. And what they had to do was provide details back to this customer of ours as to what was captured and how that customer was connected up. That was part of the package they had to supply back to this telco to get their PO raised and get paid for the work that they were doing. So they were paying the customer to capture how it was being done in the field and how they were being connected. They were paying them for that, and then they were paying their own internal staff to redraw the exact same data from a PDF document into the system. So we sat down with them and we said, I think that GIS can help here. And what we did is we wanted it to be really simple to use. We didn't want to provide an application that was intensive, required GIS knowledge, skills, lots of training. We wanted something really simple and easy to use. And that's why we developed what we're seeing here on the screen, which is a form-driven application. With minimal training, we found that most people could pick this up and start to capture information very quickly. And what this allows the end users, which are the contractors, this is now the system they use, to go out to a location. We use the geography, the geography of the device, the X and Y coordinate to understand where they are, and they can capture at that location an equipment on the premise, on the customer. They can draw in a drop cable, either as the crow flies, or they can place that through a conduit or a duct. And then at the network access point, which we can see here, the NAP, they can also connect a fiber cable to that. So they can say fiber 1 on this cable is connected to port 1 on this network access point, and they can capture all of that information live within the system, push it back to the engineering team who are sat in the office for verification only. They no longer needed to be drawing in things physically. They could just see, okay, I see these customer connections. Do they make sense or not? And then accept them. And we're really, I think that this is a really good example of using GIS to streamline systems. And they've gone from 30 engineers being able to turn up 300 customers a day. They're now at 5 users, 5 engineers, and they're about 2,000, 2,100 per day. So this process has really allowed them to do more with less, and in fact actually save costs because they're not paying for the same thing twice. And then the final thing that I want to talk about is AI and computer vision. So again, this is about field capturing as well. What we've found is that people want better data, but they don't have the teams, they don't have the field crews, they don't have the knowledge necessarily to spend on capturing it. So something we've introduced is a tool we call Envision. What it's allowing people to do in the field is pick up a tablet or a phone, something people are very familiar with, and start to accurately capture telecom data just using the camera. So we've built in image recognition, text recognition, things like that. And the generative AI captures the information using the coordinates on the hardware and what we're looking at through the camera, and really makes it a lot easier for people who aren't necessarily trained or skilled or have been an engineer for 20 years to go out there and capture really detailed data and put that seamlessly back into your GIS, back into your physical network inventory. That's where I'll leave this demo. This keeps rolling through this video, but the point there is that we're able to use the camera and the tooling to better capture data in an easier way and streamline that workflow. And that's where I'll leave my section, and we'll hand back over to Ethan, I believe, to summarize. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, just thank you to yourself and Emma for talking through those workflows today, and really kind of shows what you can start to do once you've got clean data. I just want to touch on, we've covered a lot today, so I do hope that you found it useful and interesting. I think our industry is constantly changing, and that's what makes it exciting to work in. We're often dealing with cutting edge technology, and the work that we're doing is having a positive impact on our world and how we all communicate. But our challenge is to try and stay on top of all of those trends and changes, and we can do this in a few ways. So we need to work hard to make sure that our data is accurate and up to date. And if it is, then it's easier to understand, and then we can massively save on time, and our staff can get the whole picture a lot quicker. And if we make use of the data we have to the best of our ability, as well as bringing in external sources, we can then heavily reduce the number of field visits and associated costs that go along with that, because we've done it right first time. So once we have that data, we've done our rollout, we're really happy. We then need to share it across the rest of the business. And if everyone can see the data as it's collected, then we massively free up the time for our network or GIS teams. So for example, and Emma touched on it earlier, if there's a sales team that can see exactly who they can sell to as they're reviewing a map that has the latest build, they can get to work straight away as soon as they log on. They don't have to go and ask the network team for a list of targets. The network team doesn't have to go and get it and send across, a long list or CSV of all of the addresses to go for. And once you start to do those tasks more often and they start to become more repetitive, your clean workflows, you can then start to automate these to make it a lot more simple for your staff to focus on the goals that require a lot of their thinking rather than just monotonous tasks. So overall, when we have quality and accurate data, we can actually start to gain a competitive advantage over our competitors. So we can service customers quicker, and by using our own data, we can better inform our customers, and we can also work as a team a lot more efficiently. So this kind of ultimately means that if we do have clean data and simple workflows, and we trust what we're seeing on the screen, then that will drastically increase our company's value, which, is always important, right? So we're going to head to a quick Q&A session, but before we do that, I just wanted to leave you with a few questions to go away and think about within your current business, maybe ask a work colleague as well in your day-to-day role. So if someone asked you to provide, the number and areas of your current live network, how long would it take you to do that? And how much effort for you would it have to be? Would you have to go and speak and start a whole chain of steps, or what steps would you have to take to do that? And once you've got that data and you shared that to the business and they went and made a decision on it, how much would you trust that that number is accurate and up to date? And if the same person asked someone else in your business, would they get the same response? So yeah, just something to think about. And with that, I'll hand over to start off the Q&A.
Thank you, Ethan. Thanks very much. I guess, well, it was a very comprehensive presentation. So thanks to all of you for sharing your knowledge. I believe there is much food for thought here for everyone. So indeed, we do have around 5 minutes now for a quick Q&A. So maybe let me just address one of the questions we received. This one is coming from our friend Patrick. I guess that's more for you, Ed. So the question is, in what ways do you think GIS data can further benefit telecom operations in the future?
Yeah, I think that the telecoms industry will face new challenges, right? Whether that's regulatory, so we're seeing more and more pressures for needing to store BIM level 3D data underneath, especially for underground assets. There are in Europe, you're a long way ahead of the UK, but we're finally getting the National Underground Asset Registry as well in the UK, which we're proud of, even though maybe it's 5 years late. I don't know. So I think that the need to collaborate across not just your telco, but other telcos as well, to ensure that utilities aren't digging up the road and smashing everybody else's assets will be a big driver. There are many more, but I think that's where I'll leave that question today. That's a big challenge I think that GIS data will help solve over the next 5-10 years.
Great, thanks very much, Ed. Maybe moving on to the next one. Again, okay. So with network consolidation in mind, how do disparate systems and a general lack of standardization affect the ability to actually use and benefit from GIS data? What can be done about it?
I can have a go at that one, Ethan, if you want. And I know that you'll have your thoughts as well. That's a very good question. Yeah, I think that everything we talked about today, and Emma touched on it really well, is being able to collaborate very efficiently. We talk about some really good success stories that we've had. That's only made possible by the fact that it's easy to collaborate and bring data together. If it's in disparate systems, then you still have the complexity of how do I get all of these different data sets together to do analysis on them, and how do I get them back out to all of the audiences that use different systems? And you can erode and you can eat into all of the benefits that you were starting to get in the first place, because you're having to move data around, and is it even the latest and greatest version? So I think if you can combine it all within one database, preferably, then I think that that's always going to be where you'll see the most returns on investment for using GIS within your company.
Excellent, great stuff. Thank you, Ed. I guess there's time for one more question before wrapping things up. So the question comes from Raven in this case, and I think it concerns the live demo Emma was covering earlier during, I guess, the middle of the presentation. So the question is all the demographic data only available in 3GIS, or were they from open sources?
I mean, there is plenty of open source demographic data, but the example of data that I showed was Michael Bauer demographic data, which is available within the Esri system.
Thank you, Emma. Okay, well, I guess we need to call it a day now and wrap things up, moving to the next meeting, I guess, of today's agenda for many of us. So once more, I just wanted to thank the sponsor of the session, 3GIS, as well as Esri UK for such a very interesting, high quality session. I'm sure all attendees got valuable insights on the GIS and the utilization of data for their business. A huge thank you also for those who joined us today for this live webinar, and of course, an invitation to stay tuned for more sessions coming your way, and stay connected with us for all the activities of the FTTH Council. So enjoy the rest of your day and see you soon all. Thank you very much.